old Nintendo gamer.
And son.
So then we move on to Link's Awakening DX, which was the Game Boy Color. We've talked about that, so I'm going to carry on to 2000 when Majora's Mask came out. Now, I love this as well. Even through its frustrations, I didn't have far from 100% in this because of the Bomber's Notebook and all that, wasn't it? Doing every single task in that was something that I never did. But I kind of ploughed through this as much quicker experience than I did with Ocarina of Time. And Ocarina of Time is something I've always gone back to, and Majora's Mask isn't, even though I've had it on the 3DS. I never finished it on the 3DS. I did start it, but I did finish it back in the N64 days. And it holds up, you know. It's another wonderful, slightly bizarre adventure. The thought of having that moon come down and resetting every 3 days, destroying everybody and listening to everybody's tales. They could do something very, very interesting with something like that in the Breath of the Wild engine nowadays, you know, and make it a lot darker and just see how far they could take it. What's your take on it, Nick? Majora's Mask.
For me, it's every bit as good as Ocarina of Time. I did 100% it on the N64. It took me a very, very long time. I think 2001, all of my friends were moving away from Nintendo. They all had PS1s or PS2s. And I was just obsessed with Majora's Mask, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Paper Mario 64. That's all I played until the GameCube came out. And I still remember sitting on my bed playing this and just being in absolute awe of the final place on the compass, which is sort of Egyptian world, and that dungeon, and just the sort of scale of it. Like, it was so much bigger than anything in Ocarina of Time. And yeah, I think like the actual world itself wasn't quite as interesting, and it's definitely not as ingrained in my memory. And I like the swamp actually is pretty irritating to get through.
Yeah.
But as a sort of Termina, as a sort of place, it feels a lot more alive than Hyrule did in Ocarina of Time. And I love the mask mechanic and using the different ones. I absolutely loved filling out the Bomber's Notebook and trying to figure out, you know, where to go and what to do. I thought the time system, as much as people hate it, I thought it was one of the best things that Nintendo's ever done. I thought it was almost perfectly implemented. And I always managed just to get through a dungeon before the 3 days was up by, you know, getting there right at the beginning, slowing down time and just giving myself the time to do it. And it allowed for stuff like that. When you beat the Snowhead dungeon and you saw that area without snow, and that was it. You just, you know, you're there for like 5 minutes. You can go to there's a shop in that sort of area, and everything's green. And then when you go back to the next day, you never see it again because you've got no reason to go back there, and because, you know, you're moving on to the ocean and doing the Zora dungeon. And it was just the little things like that where you could see it for like a few minutes, and then it was just back to zero again. And I think that for me was one of the best things about it. And of course, I let the moon hit the clock tower a couple of times just to see what it was like, to see what happened. But just such a weird game. I don't know who came up with all of this story, but I would say probably the strongest storyline in a Zelda game that I've played. It's absolutely fantastic. I did get it again on the 3DS, but I didn't get to the end, unfortunately. So I think I got halfway through the Zora dungeon and then gave up for some reason. But again, like Ocarina of Time, much better on 3DS. It looks great. The music as well is fantastic. They brought back the sort of the Zelda tune as well, didn't they, for the Termina Field? Tingle got introduced. So, yeah. I think these two. I mean, I can't really. I know I said before that Ocarina of Time is my favorite. Or was my favorite game of all time, but I see Majora's Mask as a sort of expansion to it, and I always think of them together rather than as separate games because it is a direct sequel. The storyline does continue, I suppose, doesn't it? And the gameplay is exactly the same. And I would have liked to have seen more of this over the years. I would have liked to have seen like a Wind Waker 2 or a Twilight Princess 2 or a Skyward Sword 2. Using exactly the same engine mechanics, just giving a sort of a different take, different storyline would have been great.
We might well be seeing it with Breath of the Wild 2, which we'll be talking about later. Greg, Majora's Mask?
I don't recall having much of an interest in it back at the time, probably because it was like a late N64 game and it would have been quite expensive and you needed the expansion pack to play it, which I didn't have. Certainly not at the time. Like I had Perfect Dark, but I didn't have the expansion pack. I would obviously eventually get one, but I never had the original N64 version of Majora's Mask. So it wouldn't have been until the GameCube where I kind of got my first taste for it, and again I think it was on that collector's edition disc,
Master Disc or whatever it's called.
Yeah. So started on that, but I recall there was talk of like save glitches and whatnot, like not necessarily save glitches, but the game had problems, like it would stop sometimes. I would just like freak out and stop, and that happened to me one time when I was trying to get into it, and I never went back to it. So again, like downloaded it on the Wii Virtual Console eventually. But it was it was a time when like the 3DS was already out and we'd already got like the Ocarina of Time 3D and stuff, and sort of thought as soon as I buy this here, it is going to get announced for the 3DS. Ultimately it did pretty soon after, so I never actually really got into the Wii Virtual Console version, so waited for the 3DS game and eventually got that, and to be quite honest, I don't really like it. I would like, I appreciate what it's going for, and like the way everything happens at certain times and stuff, like it's a cool concept and stuff. I'm just not fond of it. Like Nick says, like the swamps irritating to navigate and stuff, and that's a bit of an irritating introduction to the game, really. But I'd always find myself as soon as the dawn of the first day would begin, play the song to like set the time to like half speed or whatever, so I'd get a wee bit longer to do whatever needed to be done. But I think ultimately that the time limit was the thing that sort of like bugged me the most, and like losing all your items and stuff. It's like it didn't really work for me, and it's not a game that I can really like hang my hat on and say like this is great. Like obviously Ocarina of Time is definitely up there as one of my favourite Zelda games, but this Majora's Mask nowhere close. Don't really like it.
I love the premise of it and everything, but yeah, there were irritations in the Snowhead dungeon. I can remember not finishing on time, that rolling bull, and then having to do it all again. Yeah, that was the original one. I had no problem when I went back in the 3DS version, straight through it. So then we go into the Game Boy Color, and these are games I haven't played really. I have downloaded them on a 3DS. I didn't have a Game Boy Color back in the day. So they were Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which were Capcom developed games. Anyone have a take on these, Nick?
I think they took a lot from Link to the Past and from Ocarina of Time in terms of how to structure the game. With, all like Oracle of Seasons basically had 4 worlds, but with very little change, and then Oracle of Ages had 2, like Link to the Past, where the changes were a little bit more substantial, and then there was eight dungeons in each, similar to the to Link's Awakening, and both of them are amazing. I absolutely loved both of them, better than Link's Awakening in terms of gameplay, dungeons, structure, everything. Just great games, and you could trade between them as well, which I never really figured out how to do that. I think it was done with codes.
There's a code of some sort, isn't it? Yeah. I
never got all the rings in both games, but I definitely finished both games to completion. I think Ages is the better game overall, but yeah, just simple, reskins basically of Link's Awakening with, like, you know, colour obviously, a few new mechanics. We still had the same problem, which was you only had 2 buttons, but that never really bothered me. I've got both of these on 3DS, and I didn't actually go through either of them to the end, but I think these are just as good as any 2D Zelda game, if not better than Link's Awakening. Great games.
I might have to try them out again. Greg?
I'd never played them, but I don't have them on 3DS either, and no real interest in getting them either. No. Sorry.
I think I got them reduced with the platinum coins and all that at a reduced price. For I believe that's when I picked them up. Then Four Swords, I never played Four Swords either until it came out later on. It was not the GameCube one. I can't remember what I played Four Swords on something, but it wasn't the original
3DS version as well.
3DS version, yeah, it must have been in the Ambassador program.
It wouldn't have been an ambassador program, but it was given out as a freebie for something.
For something, yeah. So that's when I played it. I enjoyed my time with it, but not in the original Game Boy Advance. So we move on to the Wind Waker on the GameCube. Wonderful. I'll be short here. Wonderful, but not as good as Ocarina of Time. They're absolutely delightful in its visuals, and I believe the combat, going back to it as well and playing it on the Wii U later, the combat was surprising to go back to after playing later ones like Twilight Princess. And you go back, and the way that they implemented the counter system and to dodge and rotate around an enemy and hit them from behind, I'd completely forgotten that was how it worked. But obviously it felt intuitive when I was playing on the GameCube the first time. The sailor mechanics were fantastic. Yes, people are right about the Triforce quest at the end. It drags on a bit too long for what you need to do. Overall, extremely solid and a brilliant ending.
Mm-hmm.
Nick?
Yeah, I agree completely. I think everything about this game's great, and I still remember being absolutely disgusted when it was first revealed. And then finally playing it and just being, yeah. I remember when we finished it was my friend's 18th birthday, and we stayed over at his house, and we were playing it on his GameCube, so it wasn't my version of the game. We went from the bit where you get the Master Sword to the end of the game in an evening, overnight. It took us about 10 hours, I think 10, 11 hours. We went through the entire second half of the game from like 9 o'clock in the evening until about 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Had a couple of curries, had some beer, and it was great. It was really fun. I think, yeah, the thing for me that I don't like about it, like, I love the sailing and everything. I love the whole structure of the game, apart from the Triforce quest. There's a lack of land locations. That's what I would like more of. Like, yeah, it's good to have, got a couple of big islands, but I wish there was a couple more, because the actual amount of stuff on land in the game is not very big overall, is it?
It is minimal, isn't it? It was the one that stands out to me, like Dragon Roost Island. Mm-hmm. More of those kind of big islands would have been lovely.
Yeah, right? I agree. Yeah, but I still love it. I beat it on the Wii U in 2013 or 14, just after it came out. Can't remember when. And yeah, in about 3 days from start to finish, I just played it through, and it was better than I remembered. Even I absolutely loved it. And
if there was clanking in the background when Nick was talking, I've just been delivered a slice of cake and a coffee to my wife. Cheers, boys. Greg, Wind Waker.
Wind Waker, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's a great game. Like, really enjoyed it. Like, I remember going through it all, having a brilliant time, and the same as Nick. Like, whenever we first seen it, it's a wee bit shocking. I remember opening up NGC, it would have been, and and seeing it, and maybe it was still N64 at the time when we first seen Zelda or whatever everybody was calling it. But yeah, it was one of the things, like, everybody had a PlayStation and all, and it was like Nintendo's all kiddie games and stuff, and you sort of had like, at least Zelda's kind of more grown up a bit, and then they show that, and it's like, right. We can't show them that anymore. I played it and it was brilliant, and I think I must have got up to like the Triforce hunt thing, and I definitely stopped playing for a good wee while before eventually going back to it to finish it. But that's something that I find myself experiencing with most Zelda games. Actually, I would play them for a good bit, have a good time, and then would find myself like dropping away from them for a while before eventually coming back to beat them. Wind Waker was no different, but it's a great game, and it was only improved by the Wii U update.
Yeah.
Enlighten me, boys. That GameCube edition is called the Collector's Edition, isn't it? That came with Zelda Ocarina of Time, with the Master Quest as well.
Master Quest.
Yeah, it came with the Master Quest. So I definitely had this disc as well. Yeah, I definitely had that.
Which is pretty good, actually, the Master's Quest. I played through that to the end, and
Miyamoto and Shigeru Miyamoto and who's the other one? Producer now, Inuma. Inuma did have said and come out that Ura Zelda, the one that was supposed to arrive on the 64DD, it is basically the Master Quest. It is that reskin and repositioning of elements. Yeah. I didn't play it.
I loved it. It was pretty tricky, actually, but they basically just rearranged the dungeons and made them a lot harder. And obviously it took more damage as well. It's the only Master Quest I've ever played of any game, ever. And it took me, like, it just basically takes everything you know and mixes it up. So you go into the Deku Tree and you're getting introduced to enemies and sort of the ways to solve puzzles that you find much, much later in the game. So it's basically puzzles for someone who's already beaten the original. But it's...
Did you play it, Greg?
I may have started it, but like I never really find myself being that interested by the like appeal of things being rearranged. Really, like I think I would always more have been into like the traditional experience. And yeah, I just never got into it. I don't think I ever really would go into it now, to be honest.
I think if anybody wants to just go through Ocarina of Time one more time again, I think it could be quite a good way of playing it, and just rather than just, retracing the steps of playing Ocarina of Time, but doing like just going through the story. But obviously, then the dungeons are going to be slightly different, and it might give you a little bit more of a challenge.
Does the 3DS version have the?
Yeah, but I think you have to beat it first. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yeah,
you have to beat it first.
That could be an interesting shout.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give us a like if you've enjoyed our content. You can also check out our other great content on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the N-E Café podcast from all good podcast providers. Just follow the links in the description below.